my dear friend and someone I would gladly, gladly want to be marooned on an island with, Jonah Beer. I'm so happy to have you back on the Snom TV podcast. The listeners have missed you enormously.
Oh, that's very sweet. And mostly it's sweet of them because you obviously don't mean a word you're saying.
Jonah Beer, an
Yeah,
expert
I'm
in
back.
wine, a Napa
Yeah,
legend. You are
that's true.
one of the people behind Gabriel Glass. You're also apparently know quite a bit about Kiefer Sutherland movies. This is a rare situation because we are not going to talk about movies on this podcast. We're going to talk about what I think you might actually know better, which is Napa wine and some scandal up there. There's not a lot of wars fought on American soil, but this was one of the most tragic and sad chapters in American history. The Apostrophe War in Napa. What is it?
Yeah.
50 people lost their lives. Tragically, many other hundreds were lost due to, they didn't understand proper sanitation at that point. So amputations and things were happening.
Right.
The Apostrophe War, as it's come to be known in Napa, between two wineries in Napa in the Stag's Leap Wine District. I am so excited to talk about this, the ridiculousness of this so-called war, and also its implications and how this is just so Napa for this to have happened. It's perfect. It's just so good. So can you give some 30,000 foot information on what the Apostrophe War is, should be, was?
Yeah. You know what it is, and how ridiculous it all started and ended. It's almost like the perfect kind of microcosm for just how ridiculousness our litigious society can be. And it started and was fought between, I should say the first battle, not the war. The first battle was fought between Stag's Leap Wine Cellars and a proprietor at the time, Warren Winiarski, which we all know from, of course, amongst other things, the Paris tasting, the Judgment of Paris, which you've done great work on. And the other side of the battle was someone that could not have been more of his polar opposite, Carl Domaini and Stag's Leap Winery. They were separated by about 400 yards. They're literally neighbors. They sit in what is now known as the Stag's Leap District, which, by the way, came third, right? So they then joined forces to fight that battle later in another set of lawsuits. But it started and ran for a decade, 1976, and was finally settled in the California Supreme Court in 1986. And really, they both launched in the same years, right? They bought their properties in 1970. They released wines in 1972. And they were really kind of on the same track and kind of really not bothering each other. Certainly Warren Winiarski was, I'm sure, a little perturbed, but, that was just his nature. But it was when Warren won the Paris tasting in 1976 that all of the acclaim that now was being thrown at Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, he thought that Carl and Stag's Leap Winery were getting a bit of a free ride on what he called his name. And so a lawsuit was filed in 1976 to basically say, I own the name Stag's Leap and you can't use it. And that's where it all began.
I mean, this is just great. So two men, very different from each other. We're going to get into what these guys are. I know we've covered Warren a bit. Warren passed away not incredibly long ago. We did an amazing tribute with him with Steve Mathias, and I know that you knew him well, Jonah. He was a luminary, a visionary, and I don't think I'm stepping on a line to say he was a real hard ass. So we'll talk about what his personality was, but why is it called Stag's Leap? Can you put me into Napa in the time before these little AVAs were formed, Stag's Leap and okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that there's couple of important points is that to first kind of like tip us off to where we are, right? So you kind of know that we're basically directly east of the town of Yountville, right at the base of the Vaca mountain range. What are known as the geological formation that is now referred to as the Stag's Leap Palisades are these kind of craggy, rocky outcroppings that sit halfway up the Vaca mountain range. And then there's these little knolls and hills all around. And it's all really a result of a major landslide about 7 million years ago. But it exposed this rocky area. and it created this almost unique microclimate in this tiny little portion of the Napa Valley. At the time, before these guys, so before Warren or Carl set foot in the area, it was considered too cold, too cool to be planted to Cabernet Sauvignon. But a guy named Nathan Fay took kind of the pun intended leap of faith to plant Cabernet Sauvignon in that area. His 1968 Cabernet was legendary. Bob Mondavi referred to it as one of the best wines ever made in the Napa Valley. Warren Winiarski at the time had been up on Howe Mountain trying to start a vineyard that he called a tragic decision, and then tasted that 1968 Cabernet from Nathan Fay at the suggestion of Mr. Mondavi, and he went down there to looking for land and ended up buying the piece of land right next door. Carl, on the other hand, was an LA developer, restaurateur, property developer, definitely a raconteur who was coming up to Napa just to buy a small weekend getaway place on what he wanted to be like 4 or 5 acres. Ended up buying 400 acres with no intention of growing grapes or making wine or having anything to do with the wine business.
God, can you
But fell in love
imagine?
with
I
them.
mean,
I
what
know.
an insane thing to think of. That would be like I don't even know what that compares to. That would just be like if you're like, I'm going to go vacation on the moon right now. That's what that sounds like to me. But
Right.
okay,
Right.
carry on, Carl.
Yeah, no, he wanted to start it in. So anyway, these guys, they kind of got there in this time when the area was not known. I mean, they were both kind of considered, especially Winiarski, who was the first head winemaker at Robert Mondavi Winery in 1966, had worked for Lee Stewart at the original Chateau Souverain. He was this, a humanities professor from Chicago. He was intellectual, enlightened. And so he saw his purchase of this prune orchard that he ripped out and planted to what we now know as the SLV vineyard. It's this kind of like enlightened kind of like I'm smarter than you, I see something you don't see. Carl was just up there because he bought the manor. It was an old, I mean, it's from the 1800s, a stone manor that used to host socialite parties and stuff. And so Carl was not in it for the viticultural glory like Warren was, but they were both there at a time when they were considered a bit silly for choosing this part of Napa. And that's why I don't think it really brewed and turned into something until the Paris tasting, when all of a sudden they had something to fight for. It was until then they were just a renegade and a raconteur, and they were just kind of happy to go about their business for the first 6 years.
So there was no tasting rooms at this point. It's not like people were
No.
confused as to which one to go to, right? It's like, oops, I showed up at the wrong
Right.
Stag's Leap.
Right, right. And if the funny thing is that the name itself, and it comes from a story from the Native Americans, the Wapo Indians, that used to tell a story about hunters that were, chasing dinner, a stag, up into this crevasse that runs behind both Carl's place and Warren's place, and goes up into the mountain. And then there's this little like outcropping that's got almost like a V cut into it. And the story is either that the stag jumped to elude the hunters, or the stag jumped up on the rock. And then as they drew aim, he just disappeared. The stag that jumped across the crevasse to escape the hunters. No one really knows exactly what the true telling of that lore was, but that was the story that captivated both Warren and Carl, and why they both named their wineries after this place, this rocky outcropping that had ties to the old Native American lore of the Napa Valley.
This whole Judgment of Paris thing comes out now,
Yeah.
which we have to look. We've talked ad nauseum. We will continue to talk about the Judgment of Paris. Everyone who goes, why are we still talking about this? Well, it's important. It's also great lore, and
Yeah.
it's great to talk about. But that particular event, it's not like Warren signed up. It's not like he submitted for the James Beard Awards. It's not like he wanted and knew he was going to be in
Right.
this. So
Right.
there's a bit of happenstance that happens to Warren for getting in this, being right place, right time, also being a literal genius, making fantastic wine from a different angle.
Right.
When this did happen, how quick was I'm going to point my guns from across the front yard to your yard? Was this gradual? Was this like right when that Time magazine article came out?
Yes, it was in 1976. So it
Okay,
was,
so it was immediate.
I mean,
Okay.
it was it was pretty fast to get your finger on the trigger.
Uh-huh.
Just to kind of put it into context, like Warren later in life started to refer to the Judgment of Paris as a Copernican revolution, like as
Sure.
important as Copernicus, right? Like that's how he saw this moment and his role in it. Carl was still bouncing around with Bill Harlan, sailing a boat around the world. Like these guys were, he was not in it for that. But if you met Carl, and I had the pleasure of vacationing with him, both on the East Coast and then over in Burgundy, we spent some time together in Beaune. He just had the best stories, but he would not back down from anything. So as soon as Warren points his lawsuit guns at Domaney, I mean, that's basically it. Like, fights on. Like, there's no way Carl's going to back down. I mean, they had both had wines out for 4 years at this point, right? You know, like they had, or 4 vintages and a couple out in the marketplace. Amazingly, Stag's Leap Winery, Carl's, was always spelled Stags apostrophe. Stag's leap, like multiple stags leaping, right? So the possessive form of multiple stags jumping apparently at once. Stag's Leap Wine Cellars was always Stag apostrophe S as a single stag leaping. Stag's Leap Wine Cellars had a stag standing still. Stag's Leap Winery had one mid-jump. They were confusing enough, but also, like, amazingly, they had started off with this minor little difference between the two. Where the fuck was the apostrophe? And so they fired their guns at each other, and off it went. 10 years this was in the courts. 10 years. By both men's accounts, by the way, to me, in private and over wine, both absolutely said they got terrible legal advice, and the only ones that made any money were the lawyers. Like, they were resoundingly, even after it came to a settlement in 1986, they were both just like, they were so tired. They went on vacation together that following spring after the resolution in 1986. They took their families on vacation together, and just like, let's just get over it. And then they made a wine together that they bottled and sold as a peace offering wine to show the world that they were done fighting. It was called Accord, and it was the 1985 vintage. And it's just perfect. Jason, this wine, of course, Warren immediately said, well, I'll be the one to make the wine. And Carl, not really, who was never a farmer, never a winemaker, was like, I don't give a shit. I want to design the label. Carl was an art collector. He had this very eclectic style. Warren was a humanities professor of the classics. Like, immediately, Carl saw one last opportunity to stick his thumb in the eye of his foe. So he hired this avant-garde, modern artist from the mid 80s to design something that looks like it's half Madonna, half Cyndi Lauper design. It's an electric blue stag with these fiery red eyes and this the crisscross Tron red graphic behind it. It's the worst thing you've ever seen. And Warren hated it. They had to split the bottles and each were selling it. You know, it was a part of their peace accord. And the ones that Warren kept, he soaked the labels off and just kept the back label on there so he didn't have to look at it anymore. And when I asked Carl, I said, did you really love that label? And he goes, no, I fucking hated it, but I knew Warren would hate it more. So it was literally just the last little thumbing his nose at Warren, even in the peacetime accord. So anyway, lawyers got rich. They got bad advice. It went on for a decade.
The only thing that's missing here is Carl's daughter falling in love with Warren's son in the middle of this, you know, and some poor wine sales rep who just tries to sell both their wine dying in the middle of it. You know, we need Mercutio.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm giving away free movie ideas to anybody listening to this right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we could. It's the young Claire Danes and Leo DiCaprio could play these later in life,
Yeah.
you know. But
not to be a jaded jerk here too, but I love that they came out with this wine called Accord, and probably 99.1009s had no idea that this fight even happened.
Exactly.
I mean, this isn't exactly some turmoil in the Strait of Hormuz or something like that. This is a little place in a not yet designated AVA. So before I just want to know, do you know details of this settlement? I mean, aside from the lawyers putting new roofs on all their houses in Malibu?
Yeah. There was no financial settlement between the two wineries. They both were just basically uh, committed by the court to sticking with their apostrophetic placement. Stag's Leap Winery had to be S apostrophe, and Stag's Leap Wine Cellars had to say apostrophe S. They couldn't move their apostrophes. The apostrophe became the defining element between the two. And so, flash forward to then when the Napa Valley is subdividing into sub AVAs. And of course, what do they want to call the district that where these two gentlemen both have wineries and vineyards, but they want to call it the Stag's Leap District. And so Warren and Carl join forces again in litigation to defend the name Stag's Leap, as in no one else can use it. So they go to battle with the Napa Valley vintners who want to create this as the Stag's Leap District, and they try to sue to keep them from using the name Stag's Leap in the name and in any version of the district. And of course, they've already established with the Supreme Court that no one can own the name Stag's Leap. It's just, where does the apostrophe go? So where does the district settle? No apostrophe. There's no apostrophe in the district. Stag's Leap District is just STAGS, as in there's no possession of a stag leaping. It's just a declaration statement that stags do in fact leap. So Stag's Leap District has no apostrophe, and that's how they got away with using the name Stag's Leap. So there's no more places to put apostrophes in the word stag. So I feel like we're just down to that. This is the three this is the three that we're stuck with for life.
Do you think that these two older gentlemen have now passed on,
Yeah.
both to quite a bit of fanfare and news and articles? Do you think that they are somewhere now arguing, or are they sitting at a table laughing about all of this? I mean, I'm curious where they'd be mentally.
Today they would be they have, I mean, and Carl and Warren especially, they just didn't, that once it was settled, they were done. They were so done with it. They didn't like talking about it. They certainly didn't want to mention it. Like when I started working for Warren Winiarski in 1998, and I worked there for 5 years up to 2003, it was the time when we were still making Petite Syrah. But he was just so adamant about not being confused with, as it was always referred to, the other Stag's Leap. He literally just said, I'm going to stop making Petite Syrah. I'm going to let that will be their thing. I will be the guy that's known for Cabernet. So we had a thriving little business making and selling Petite Syrah, which, by the way, they spelled Syrah differently because, of course, they had to, Syrah with a Y, Syrah with an I. But the truth is that Warren just wanted to be, he just didn't like, and he couldn't stand the idea of anyone. It wasn't Carl. It was anyone getting a free ride on what he thought was his accomplishment, his largesse, his kind of piece of the world that he had carved out. To the point that that's why in 2001, the Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, Warren's Napa Valley Cabernet, became known as Artemis. He chose a name he could trademark that couldn't be have any coattail riders, and so he added that name just to kind of help continue to push back on. At that time, Stag's Leap Winery was owned by Behringer, and he was just really worried about this massive marketing company and what would they do to him. So he kind of circled the wagons. As far as Carl, I don't think he gave a shit about it the day after it was settled. He was into other lawsuits at that point. Carl certainly, he didn't mind. He didn't find a lawyer he didn't want to hire. That's for sure. But, that's who he was. These guys were. So what are they doing today? They're certainly not sharing a laugh. They're sitting on opposite sides of heaven. Carl with his gin drinking and mezcal drinking buddies known as the Gonads, and Warren over there with Copernicus.
the Gonads. That's a great. We need to have Carl and the Gonads. That's another podcast coming up.
These guys, they started it is right after Carl left the Napa Valley Vintners Association because he thought it was becoming too political. He just wanted to hang out with his buddies and drink wine. So he and Stu Smith and a bunch of, I think it ended up like 10 or 12 of them. They started, it was the gastronomy. And so you'll have to look it up. There was a whole,
I know the boys up at Smith Madrone, and they're not, they're generally not like, oh yeah, we'll go with everyone else.
Yes, exactly.
This is, yeah.
So these guys started this thing, and they would do 5 6 hour lunches at restaurants, and Carl was, I mean, you just couldn't imagine two guys more different, right? So like I worked for Warren for a long time, and then I became friends with Carl later in my time at Frogsley. And it started with us. We were on vacation together, and we were in New York, and we were sitting down for our first dinner. It was, some of us had known each other, some of us hadn't met. And I had met Carl a number of times, but of course he had forgotten at this point. And we're sitting around dinner, and everyone's just kind of telling a story. And Randy Lewis was there, and I told a story about Warren being a bit of a jackass, and it got a huge laugh out of Randy, and Carl perked up and he leaned in and he said, "Oh, thank God. I thought you were going to be a bit of a dud." And so he wanted to tell funny stories. He wanted to drink. I mean, for the next week, we traveled up the East Coast and drank a ton of wine, and I heard story after story, a handful about Warren. But this was a guy who, I mean, he bought his first bar when he was 20 down in LA. I mean, he developed restaurants, he was property developer. He was the general manager of the Tropicana in Las Vegas, for crying out loud. Warren was teaching summer classes on the philosophy of Shakespeare at St. John's College in Santa Fe. Carl's at the fucking Tropicana, comping Bugsy Siegel, like,
Right? Oh yeah,
can
exactly.
you
Yeah.
imagine two more opposite people that's, I mean, they end up next door neighbors with wineries in the same, I mean, it just doesn't get any more apples and oranges than Carl and Warren. And that's why I had such, and still do, such love and affection for them both, because I saw a lot of what I thought I wanted to be in Warren, this intellectual, erudite, professor always wearing khakis. But in reality, I'm much more Carl. Like I'm much more 5 hour lunches. Forget that you didn't do your taxes. Like, just everything. I mean, Carl was a boom and bust guy, and for
Well,
that, he'll always have a special place in my heart.
good news is you look great in khakis, so you can do both. It's okay.
I do love a good khaki. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
who doesn't except your wife? Anyways, the all right, so so what's the legacy of this? Is there anything that still stands other than this little trifle that we talk about? There were a lot of lives lost, but is there any legacy? Is there any legacy in Napa? Is there a plaque? Do we have like a
No,
a,
there's,
a place where
there's
people put flowers?
No, there should be a plaque, and it should be right outside of the French Laundry where Carl once got hit by a woman with a purse. She had like a book in her purse, and he was smoking a cigar. This is before Thomas Keller, and it's one of the great Carl stories. But it should be in Yountville, and it should be dedicated to. The legacy is that it is really just in law schools. This is something that's still taught in trademark law. So if you want to know the real actual legacy of this is a story that's been written about by law students. It's studied by trademark lawyers. It's where did it go wrong? What was the lawyer's arguments? How did it go right? So honest to God, the only goddamn legacy is in the legal profession. Here, it's more along the lines of the legacy is that you know, good fences make for good neighbors, and apparently, wild success for one means a lot of lawsuits for the two of them. But honestly, they neither of them. For the two men, this is not a part of their legacy. This was just a thing that they both went through, and I think that regrettably so. I don't. I certainly know firsthand that neither one of them wishes they had done this in retrospect.
Yeah, I love the idea of a bunch of lawyers going, now, we're not going to teach you about the case. We're going to teach you that older men are very insecure, and you can prey
Yes.
upon this and make
Yes.
like you need a new roof on your second house. We can
Yeah,
help
right.
you get that. It's like,
Right. How to get
uh,
that second home in Aspen, a lesson on intellectual property law. Yeah, I feel like
uh,
that's exactly the legacy of the whole dang thing.
what a
You
brutal
know,
situation.
if you
Uh,
if yeah, if you're lucky enough, and you scour the auction sites, if you really do want to get a handle on both their legacies, get a bottle of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars Cabernet somewhere in 1985 and prior, and find a bottle of Carl's Petit Syrah somewhere from 1985 or prior. And you can literally see the two men in those wines, like with Warren's kind of super elegant and polished, and pseudo Francophile approach, and Carl's just kind of hedonic approach to wines. They both loved what they made. And the best thing I can say about their legacies is that neither of them actually looked at the other guy with any sense of jealousy. They were both so comfortable in their lane and doing what they were doing. And that's why they were able to be quite literally friends immediately after after the war was called a tie. They were able to just kind of move on. And so, for that, I feel like the legacy that we should be taking from it here in Napa as vintners and is that don't take yourself so fucking seriously. Remember that you're here to be a part of something, not to be something. And they passed away a year apart from one another. They both passed away exactly as they would have wanted, surrounded by the people that they would have wanted. And so the takeaway really should be enough of this, kind of seeing the Napa Valley as the thing that you're going to own. It's not. Neither of them own their things anymore, right? I mean, Treasury's got one and Antinori's got the other. Like, it's not the takeaway for us needs to be let's just be better and enough of this. So hopefully that's where we come away. For me, I just gonna go have a 5-hour lunch and pretend I'm Carl Domaney.
Fair. I mean, meanwhile, France is discarding of like thousands of pallets of Miller High Life because it's a champagne of beers. So it still goes, it still continues, but it's okay,
Right. And it will forever.
It will forever and ever. As long as there are old men who are semi-bored but very busy and a little insecure, we're going to have lots of lawyers to feed. So.
And the lawyer willing to take their money, no doubt.
That's right. Well, Jonah, on behalf of all of the lives lost in the Great Apostrophe War, the widows and the children who were raised without fathers, I just want to say thank you for joining the podcast today. I really, really, really appreciate it. We're going to have you back on very soon to talk movies. I know all of you have been asking when the next movies Wine Cameo podcast is coming. Well, boy, we got some. So thank you, Jonah. They're clamoring. We got some coming. Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.